Good morning, Commissioner, Council, Dr. Uzarowski. Just continuing Dr. Uzarowski's examination. May I proceed, Commissioner?
Please proceed.
Thank you. Dr. Uzarowski, I just want to come back to, I think it was the last topic that we were discussing yesterday afternoon. And we were talking about whether Ms. Becca Lane from the MTO and whether she had contacted you to obtain a contact for the City of Hamilton in or around November of 2010. And you indicated that you did not recall Ms. Lane making this inquiry of you at that time in 2010, but you recalled that she had at some point in time, and you thought it was in and about 2015 or 2016. And as I indicated yesterday, we didn't have any emails or notes about communications between you and her in the end of 2010, but we do actually have some from January 2016. So I'd just like to go and see if that is what you were talking about and if that assists. So if we could go to overview document 7, image 108, please. And I'm not proposing to get into a lot of the details about the communications. We just want to place it in time. I expect it'll be dealt with in subsequent examinations. And so paragraph 339 indicates on January 22nd, 2016, Ms. Lane emailed you under the subject line Red Hill Valley Parkway, writing, "I received a strange media request about performance of the Red Hill Valley Parkway. Do you keep in touch with Hamilton on that project? Are you aware of any performance issues? Perhaps there's an asphalt cement cracking issue." I'm in the dark on this one. And then you forward, you can see at the next paragraph 240, you forwarded that to Mr. Moore. And then if we could now go just to place this in time, if we could go to Golder 2915. Which is not in the overview document, so we'll need to mark this as an exhibit, which would be exhibit 25, Commissioner.
Okay.
That's Golder 2915 register.
Sorry, Council, I typed in the wrong number. GOL 2915.
Yes.
Apologies.
Okay, so at the email at the bottom of that chain is responding to Ms. Lane's, and if you could expand it, the one that's at 11:54 a.m. Yeah, next one, actually that one and the one below it, that would be great. Thank you. Great, so then Dr. Uzarowski, you reply on January 25th, 2016, thanking her for the email, indicating you'll talk to the city. There are short deeps and surface cracking. It is an interesting question whether the cracking is related to asphalt cement. RHVP was paved in 2007 and the asphalt cement came from Bitumar. And she responds with, "Do you have Gary Moore's phone number? I thought I should give him a call." And if you register the next one up. There you go. And you reply, I think on the same day, you give Gary Moore's phone number and that you've already passed the email, her email to Gary, and we'll call him after lunch. So thank you for taking that down. Is this what you were referring to asphalt cement? Is this what you were thinking of yesterday when you were talking about recalling a discussion or communications with Ms. Lane?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And this is January 16. That is in the time period you were talking about. do you have any recollection then of communicating with Ms. Lane of the MTO regarding the Red Hill Valley Parkway prior to these emails in January 2016?
No, not about Red Hill Valley Parkway. Okay. We were both members of the Asphalt Cement Committee organized by OMPA, but not about Red Hill Valley Parkway.
Okay. Thank you. Registrar, if we could go back to overview document 3 then. And if we go to image 70, please, 70. And in this paragraph indicates that in or about September 21 to 24th, 2008, Mr. Moore and Dr. Uzorowski presented 2 papers at the 2008 annual conference of the Transportation Association of Canada. And then 2 papers are listed, one titled Innovative Comprehensive Design and Construction of Perpetual Pavement on the Red Hill Valley Parkway in Hamilton, which is indicated it's authored by you, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Peter Gamble of Dufferin. And the second one, Sustainable Pavements, Making the Case for Longer Design Lives for Flexible Pavements by you and Mr. Moore. And so looking at the first one in paragraph A is the one that I want to discuss in some detail. This is, did you present this at the TAC conference?
Definitely, I presented it, but I'm not sure whether Gary also did part or whether he was the co-presenter. I definitely would be one of the presenters, or maybe the only one, but it's possible that Gary also presented a part of it.
Okay. And if we could go actually at footnote 199 below there, it indicates that, and I don't propose to go to the draft itself, but 199 indicates a draft with tracked revisions at HAM 328 that Mr. Moore revised your original draft and emailed the revisions to you on May 20th, 2008. So am I correct with respect to this paper, the Innovative Comprehensive Design and Construction of Perpetual Pavement of the Red Hill Valley Parkway in Hamilton, that you did the initial cut and Mr. Moore revised it? Is that how it worked? You were the main author and he provided revisions?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And you can take that down, Registrar, thank you. And Mr. Gamble, Peter Gamble of Dufferin, is listed as an author. Did he provide any comments or edits?
No, he was the co-author. I sent him the paper and asked him for comments, but he had no comments.
Okay, and did he provide any input at all on the paper? Like, I anticipate that Mr. Gamble will say that he did not.
No, like he was the contractor, so you know that was basically described what we did during construction, but for the paper itself, he did not.
Okay, and just why does one list someone as an author in a paper when they do not provide any input to the paper?
Because it is a good practice, and we are always encouraged that consultants should not be the only authors of technical papers. It's more interesting and brings more value if the owners and the contractors are involved. So whether it was TAC or CTA, we're always encouraged to involve other parties. So this is what we did for this paper.
Okay, so as a matter of practice, you may list an owner or a contractor as being an author, even if they don't have any input, because it is something that TAC or CTAA like to see. Is that fair?
Yes, they appreciate if more people are involved.
All right. And you indicate that you believe you did send a copy of the paper to Mr. Gamble for review?
Yes, I let's say not me myself, but I sent a copy of the paper to our administrative assistant, Donna Walsh, and I asked her to pass it to Mr. Gamble.
And I don't think we necessarily need to go to that, but Commissioner, there is an email where Dr. Zarowski requests his assistant, as he said, Donna Walsh, to send it to Mr. Gamble, but there's no record of the actual email being sent to Mr. Gamble with the paper. So, okay, so if we could go to the paper itself. This is at HAM 13032.
Sorry, Council, do you mind just repeating the?
Yes,
call?
Hamilton 13032. That is it. So this is the paper we were just speaking of, Dr. Zarowski?
Yes, it is.
And if we could go to image 4, because generally speaking, the paper is about the development of the perpetual pavement structure, speaks of the feasibility study that we talked about earlier, about the instrumentation, the installation of instrumentation for monitoring in the Red Hill Valley Parkway, and some construction issues as well. But generally speaking, that's what it covers. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And so here in section 2.0, speaking of the feasibility study, and that's referring back to what we talked about yesterday, the feasibility study that you conducted at Mr. Moore's request in 2005, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right. And the at the bottom there, in the second last paragraph, the last sentence, it says more information about these analyses is provided in, and then it's endnote 10. And I can take you to it if you want, but I can tell you that endnote 10 refers to the CTAA paper from 2006 that we discussed yesterday, which covered a lot of the same ground as the feasibility study. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. And then if we go to image 7, so on the top there, maybe you could expand this for us, Registrar, the top image with the figure with including the, yeah, thank you. So this is the comparison, similar to what was in the CTAA paper, the diagram, just showing the comparison between the conventional deep strength design and the perpetual pavement design, right?
Yes, it is.
And for the perpetual pavement design, which was actually implemented on the Red Hill, at the top it's showing the 40 millimeter wearing course, meaning which is the SMA layer, and then the 120 millimeter asphalt binder course, which we'll see is actually 2 different layers, right?
Yes, two layers. Yeah.
Yeah, and then in the 80 millimeter rich bottom layer, the rich bottom mix layer.
Yes.
And below that, there's the granular base layers. Okay, and if we could drop that and then look at the next photograph, you expand photograph 2 and yeah, thank you. And is this is a core sample actually taken from the constructed Red Hill, is that right?
Yes, it is a full depth core taken from the Red Hill Valley Parkway.
Okay, and it's showing what we discussed, but it actually shows the 2 middle layers, right? The 2 binder layers?
Yes, lower and upper binders, yes.
And with SMA on the top and the rich bottom mix on the bottom. Okay. If we go to the next image, image 9. And you were talking yesterday about the paving approach for the SMA. And the image 9 shows, photograph 3 shows echelon paving of the SMA surface course using material transfer vehicle. What's echelon paving?
Echelon paving is used in order to avoid cold joints during paving. So one paver is closely followed by the other one, and the distance is very close. It's typically maximum 30 meters. So by the time the second paver comes, the joint or the mix has no time to cool. So by this time we avoid having additional cold joint. It's basically hot joint, almost looks like no joint at all.
Okay. And I think you had indicated that is also important for SMA because you don't want it to cool because it creates compaction problems. Is that right?
Yes, the joints are particularly difficult for SMA. So this way we significantly improve the quality of the map.
Okay. And Registrar, if you could expand the 2 paragraphs immediately below the photograph. Not for just, well, that's fine. That's fine. You can do that. Okay. In these paragraphs, you are discussing what we talked about yesterday about the requirements were tighter than in the OPSS standard specifications, particularly on gradations, asphalt cement content, and particularly compaction. And you indicate the RBM compaction, and then with SMA, you indicate in the 5th line that that the compaction was to be between 93 and 97.5%. That's what we were talking about yesterday?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you indicate that it's tighter than typically used. But just to confirm, we saw yesterday that on the later compaction that the OPSS standard was applied. Is that right?
Yes, I think it was an error, but yeah, I think yes, you showed this. Yes, yes.
Okay. And then at image 12, if we could drop that and go to image 12, Register. Under this heading, quality control, quality assurance, there's a description of what we talked about yesterday, being the ignition oven and the issues with the breakdown of aggregates in there, and then due to the high temperatures, and referring to the extraction gradation method being used, or these. And you refer to the environmental issues as well, about no solvents being allowed on site. So that's what we were talking about yesterday around that issue?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, and then you describe how that was resolved and resolved any discrepancy in the correlation issue so you could move past that issue. Okay, and image 13. So the paragraph at the top in the photo deals with compaction, and wonder if you could expand that and the photo, Registrar. Thank you. So in the paragraph above the photos, it speaks of compaction generally achieved by increasing the number of rollers. But I think you mentioned yesterday. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. They increased to 6, yes.
And careful control of the mix temperature, and avoiding excessive water, which I think you mentioned, and then paving in echelon contributing to the successful achievement of the compaction requirements and mitigated problems with longitudinal joints. And what I note here is that although it describes how the issues were resolved, there's no mention in here of the compaction problems encountered in the earlier stages. Is that right?
You are right. Yeah, we only describe how we resolved the issue.
Okay, and I appreciate you saying that it was an error, but there's nothing in there about the clearly about the less in the latter days in the nuclear density reports using the OPSS lower standard for compaction. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And there's also no mention in here in the paper about the test strip failure. Is that correct?
Yes, no, it's not mentioned. It's not written about the test strip failure.
Okay, and there's no mention of your communicating to Dufferin that it was proceeding at its own risk due to the failure of the test strip, right?
No, we didn't include it.
Okay, and there's no mention as well of concerns that you described about using the mixed aggregates, or the concern about the early low age friction issue, or the MTO skid testing that was done in October of 2017 arising out of those concerns. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct.
Okay, and why? I mean, I appreciate decisions have to be made about what goes into a paper or not, but are those things and not of interest if to a reader?
I think it can be. It was just, the purpose was to show generally how this thing can be constructed, and it's based on my experience, our experience that we had in the past, like with particularly with compaction, with construction, and that was unique to use echelon paving and MTV. So just to show at least some aspects of the project that that had positive impact on the quality.
That had positive impact on the quality, but not negative.
Oh, we mentioned that. We wrote about problems with ignition oven, problems with initial compaction that we had to improve. So we covered some aspects. We didn't cover everything.
There is no mention, I notice, of the use of the vibratory roller to improve compaction either. Do you know why that is?
It was just the paper at limited size, so we just wanted to show what was successfully implemented and what allowed us to improve compaction and to achieve what we wanted in the specification. So we showed what worked. No, I realize now there is no vibration or vibratory mention.
And with respect to the concerns about the aggregates and skid resistance and the MTO skid testing that took place, did you have any discussions or communications with Mr. Moore about whether or not to include that in the paper?
I don't recall. I think I sent him an initial version of the paper for his input, and as Peter Gamble didn't add anything, but Gary added his comments and his edits, and I think that was it.
Yeah, and I confirm that from the documents that have been produced, the initial draft by you does not have anything about those issues, and nor is there by Mr. Moore. So I'm wondering if you had any discussions with him about whether to include that in the first instance or not.
No, I don't recall.
You don't recall that happening, or you know that didn't happen?
I think it didn't happen.
All right. And in retrospect now, looking at this paper, do you, and the issues that we've just discussed that are not in there, do you think it provides a fair description of the challenges and issues encountered on the issues that we just discussed with respect to aggregate, skid resistance, and generally with the SMA placement?
So, that time there was no issue of skid resistance discussed. So, but I think it, in my opinion, it provides some good hints for other agencies and contractors how to address some, in our opinion, main aspects of SMA. Not only SMA or perpetual payment, but with particular focus on SMA construction. These are typical problems that were observed, so we wanted to describe how we address them.
Well, right, and on that point though, with the early age, low friction issue, I mean it's a typical issue, right? And so I would have thought that the friction testing that was done and the results which you described as, I think not great, but adequate, that also would have been a relevant thing to include. Did you not consider that at all?
I think at that time we did not consider.
Okay. I have no further questions, Commissioner.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Uzorowski. I appreciate your time and preparation. Commissioner, I can advise that counsel for the participants have consulted and about their time needed, and as well the order in which they will question Dr. Uzorowski. And so the order that is proposed is that counsel for Hamilton proceed first, then counsel for Dufferin, then counsel for MTO, and in accordance with the rules of procedure for the inquiry, with counsel for Golder examining as the final examiner for the participants. And the estimates, of course, are not down to the minute, but we anticipate that counsel for Hamilton will be approximately 60 minutes, give or take 15. Counsel for Dufferin, perhaps 30 minutes. Counsel for the MTO, around 30 minutes. And counsel for Golder, about 60.
Okay. Thank you. Then why don't we have the city proceed with our questions?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Dr. Uzorowski. My name is Eli Letterman, and I am counsel for the City of Hamilton. I had a few questions for you this morning, and I wanted to start by asking you about the friction test results that you had received from the MTO in October of 2007. And I think the best place to look is starting with the email in which those results were sent to you, which can be found at Golder document 0003513. And if I could just ask the registrar to pull up that email, I'd be grateful. You'll see that this is the email, looking at the bottom of the string, that Chris Raymond at the MTO sent to you by email October 18, 2007. And he says, Ludimir, attached, please find the friction testing results for the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And then there were two Excel spreadsheets that were attached to that email, but for the ease of our review of it, it's probably easiest to pull that from the OD document. And if I could just ask the registrar to pull up OD4, image 61. Yes. And I take it that these were the results of the friction test that the MTO had conducted, yes?
Yes, it is. Yes, they
Okay.
are.
And you reviewed the results at that time, at the time that they came in?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And the document that we're looking at in terms of this one, image 61, you'll see at the top of the page, it says in the middle, DIR, and it has a colon and it says SBL1. And am I correct that that's a reference to southbound lane 1 on the Red Hill Valley Parkway?
Yes, you are right.
Okay. And looking down towards the bottom of the page, you'll see that there is an average FN number at 33.9.
Yes, it is.
And that reflects the average friction number obtained from the MTO of just under 34 at 33.9, correct?
Yes, it is.
And then just looking at the other results, the individual results from the precise locations, there are two entries that fall below FN 30, and that is in the third line at 28.7, where it says Barton Street along to the right, correct?
Yes, it is.
And then going down a few lines, you'll see there is one at 28.1 at Queenston Road, which is the landmark referenced there, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And just so I'm clear, just dealing with southbound lane 1, you found that the friction test results that the MTO had conducted were acceptable, yes?
Yes, generally, they were acceptable. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was because, and I think you told us earlier that the expected value within the pavement community was that if you had an average of around 30, then you were generally content. Yes?
Yes.
And then when we look over at image number 62, this, and just if we could enlarge that, you'll see that at the top of the page it says DIR SBL2. So do I take it that this is the test results from southbound lane 2, the second lane in that southbound lanes on the Red Hill Valley Parkway that the MTO conducted, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And looking down at the average friction number that was obtained from southbound lane 2, you'll see that there is a reference to 33.8 as the average, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And then just looking at the specific locations, there are, by my count, of the, I think it's 23 locations, there are 4 that fall slightly below 30, and that is in the third line at 29.6. And then just scrolling down the list about halfway through, you'll see there's a 28.4. And then 5 lines below that, 28.6. And the next one below that, 29.7 at King Street. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. And again, despite the fact that there were those specific isolated locations that fell slightly below 30, you were still generally satisfied with the average friction number being in the southbound lanes 2 of 33.8, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if we could just go back to the covering email at GOL 3513. You'll see that Mr. Raymond attaches those results, and he notes in the third paragraph of the email, you may wish to note that some of the friction numbers less than 30 correlate with being located under a structure. And as I understood your evidence yesterday, Dr. Uzarowski, you understood that what that was referring to was that those numbers that came in under 30 related to the fact that they had been taken from locations located near a structure, correct?
Yeah, yes, under structure, yes.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you considered or indicated was that perhaps the structure created a shadow which could affect the frictional characteristics of those specific spots.
Yeah, well, the pace that the asphalt cement will wear off. Yeah, yeah, but yeah, that's right.
Okay. And then in the next paragraph of his email, he says, should you have any questions regarding the results, please do not hesitate to contact us. And I take it, there doesn't appear to be any notes or any email or any record, Dr. Uzarowski, of you contacting Mr. Raymond or anyone else at the MTO to specifically discuss these results. And I take it you don't have a specific recollection of having a discussion with Mr. Raymond about him at that time.
No, I don't recall.
Okay. But certainly you have no recollection of advising Mr. Raymond at that time that you were generally satisfied with the results, correct?
That's right.
Or that you had any concerns about the results in any way?
No, I think I knew from my experience that they will come up quickly. When
Sure.
Yes.
Sure, but that's not something that you recorded anywhere to Mr. Raymond or to anyone else at the MTO. That was just an expectation that you had in your own mind.
Yes.
Okay. You'll see in the second paragraph of his email, he says, please pass the results on to those involved with the project, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And I take it that those involved in the project, he's referring to the city of Hamilton, or representatives of the city of Hamilton.
Yes, city of Hamilton. I think we also, yes, city of Hamilton and CA and Dufferin. I think we passed.
Okay, and I think you were asked about this yesterday, and I'm correct that you don't have a specific recollection of your discussion with the city of Hamilton, whether it was Mr. Moore or Mr. Audie or both of them about these results, correct?
I emailed them the results, and I said I would call them. I think I called them, but I don't have any notes.
Okay. But certainly, you would agree that if you had any concerns about these friction results, you would have communicated those to Mr. Moore or Mr. Audie when you provided it to them, correct?
Yeah, I would tell them what my opinion was.
Yeah. And your opinion was that the results were acceptable, as you've said. And I do want to ask you just about another document, if I could, at GOL 0002642. And this fast forwards a bit into the year 2013, but I'm particularly interested in the middle email of this exchange. If we could just enlarge that portion. Well, I see that Mr. Lewis has risen, so I'll just stop there for a second.
Yes, just not an objection per se, Commissioner. I realize, in order to clarify what Dr. Uzorowski was saying before, that I did move forward into 2016 because to make sure what he was talking about with respect to discussions with Ms. Lane. But I do have a concern, since Dr. Uzorowski is going to be testifying twice. This is his sort of pre-construction construction part of it, that while it's absolutely fair to get Dr. Uzorowski's recollections and at the time of receiving the results and so forth, I do have a concern about then asking what his recollections or what his views were of the results 6 years later. So I just raise that as a concern, and I don't want to get into I'd like to avoid getting into a situation where counselor on this issue or other issues are looking at what people said years later about what happened at the time.
Are you suggesting that that's a question that's appropriate for the second stage?
That for his second testimony at that time. I mean, he's given his views on what his at the time what he thought, and I think that's what's appropriate for this phase of his evidence.
Mm-hmm.
May I just add, Commissioner, that the witness has been prepared and reviewed the documents with some care relating to the design and construction. Obviously, we've looked at these documents more generally, but we prepared for this piece of evidence.
Mr. Letterman?
Thank you. So I don't intend to question Dr. Uzorowski about the events of 2013 that surrounds this email. My focus and the reason why I've put this email in front of him now is because this email specifically deals with the testing that was conducted in 2007, as well as the questions that Dr. Uzorowski was asked about yesterday regarding other MTO testing that was being performed on the Red Hill following 2007. And so that's the purpose of my questions, is not to get into, because we'll deal with that at a subsequent time, to deal with the events of 2013. But this specific email relates to Dr. Uzorowski's knowledge and understanding of what transpired in 2007 regarding the MTO friction testing that was conducted then at construction, as well as the MTO testing that Dr. Uzorowski was asked about yesterday following 2007.
Right. I think we should remit this question to the second stage, which Mr. Uzorowski testifies. If he hasn't been asked to focus on anything other than the issues of design and construction at this stage, I think we should limit the questions to questions that pertain to those issues.
That's fine. Thank you, Commissioner. I'll deal with it at the next round then. Appreciate that. Okay, then we can take that one down. And we can take that document down as well. Thank you. I do want to make sure I have your evidence correctly with respect to your note-taking practices, Dr. Uzorowski, because I understood your evidence yesterday that you would often prepare notes in advance of a meeting to cover topics that you intended to address at an upcoming meeting. Is that right?
Yes, it is. So,
and can we agree that if there was something particularly important that arose during the course of a meeting or a discussion with somebody, that it would be your practice to make a note of that if it was particularly important or material?
yes, yes, it is.
Okay. And I thought I heard you say yesterday that for much of the events that go back to the 2005 to 2007 timeframe, given that that was 15 to 17 years ago, you really do have to rely on your notes or other documents as opposed to having an independent memory of specific meetings and discussions. Yes?
I think I have relatively good memory, but obviously, you know, the notes are critical because they help. Yes.
Okay. Now, I do want to ask you some questions relating to perpetual pavement and SMA. Starting with the decision-making around the use of perpetual pavement and SMA on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And before you were asked, or Golder was asked to conduct a feasibility study for the city on the RHVP, I understand that you were familiar with SMA and its proposed use as a surface course.
Yes, I was.
And you had published on that topic?
Yes, I co-authored a paper, 1999 paper.
Right. And then again, as I understand it, you also co-authored a paper for the Canadian Technical Asphalt Association in 2004 called Perpetual Asphalt Pavements. Yes?
Yes, yeah.
And if I could just ask to bring that paper up, it's Golder 0003343. And this is the 2004 paper. And if I could just go to image 20. Just jumping to the conclusions, you'll see that your paper concludes at 9.0, better materials and improved analytical techniques now allow flexible pavements to be designed to last 50 years without structural failure. And that was consistent with your work that you had done at that point in time as to your view of perpetual pavements, correct?
Yes.
And not only do you speak of the benefits of perpetual pavement, your paper also talks about the use of SMA specifically in perpetual pavement designs, yes?
Yes.
And just in terms of looking at that, at image 4 to 5, starting with image 4, you'll see, if we just back up to image 4, yes, there at the bottom of that page, there's reference to 3.0 materials technology. You see that, Dr. Uzorowski?
Yes, 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 I can see.
Yeah, and just in the last sentence of that page, you say, similarly, the introduction of new mix types, such as stone mastic asphalt, that's SMA, allow the designer the freedom to tailor the material selection to further control the stresses imposed by traffic on the roadway and to extend service life even under the harshest traffic conditions. And that was consistent with your understanding at that time in 2004 about the benefits of SMA being used alongside of perpetual pavement, yes?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
And you were aware that perpetual pavement has been used in the province of Ontario before, correct?
Yes, there was a perpetual pavement project on Highway 406 in Ontario.
Yes, and also in use on the Don Valley Parkway, if I'm not mistaken. And just to help you with that, I think image 15 of this paper addresses that. If I could just bring that up. And you'll see here that table 8 talks about using perpetual pavement on the Don Valley Parkway, correct?
Yes, it was sort of perpetual pavement. Yes, we call it perpetual pavement.
Yeah, and just looking at what you say under, if I can just ask you to look at image 19 to 20. You describe under table 12, a 50-year analysis period, totals life cycle costs. And you say at the bottom of that table, this analysis shows a somewhat modest reduction in the total present worth of the perpetual pavement design with a reasonable increase in the initial cost. However, the real value or benefit is quite evident in the considerably lower rehabilitation and maintenance costs for the perpetual pavement design. If the user delay costs are also factored into the life cost analysis in terms of less disruption to the traveling public because of less frequent interventions, the perpetual pavement design would show an even greater advantage over the conventional design. Do you see that?
Yes, I can see.
And that reflected your views about the benefits associated with a perpetual pavement at that point in time, correct?
Yes, correct.
And I think that point is also, if I can just now ask you about a paper that you co-authored in 2006, which can be found at Golder 0003367. This is the article or the paper that you published alongside of Mr. Moore and Mr. Aurelio. It was written in 2005, but I understand your evidence that it was published in 2006, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And in this paper, you describe the benefits associated with perpetual pavement and SMA, yes?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and if I can ask you to look at image 9. Sorry, 9.
Sorry, Council, this is image 9. Do you, page 9, perhaps?
Yes, perhaps it is page 9. My apologies. Yes, page 9. No, I'm sorry. I saw it there just a moment ago. It was just back, it was 2.4, dealing with benefits section. There it is. Image 7, my apologies. Is that image 7?
So this is image 11, Council.
Pardon me, image 11. Under 2.4, benefits, and I'm interested in the second paragraph, in which you say both pavement design alternatives incorporate stone mastic asphalt as the surface course mix. SMA is considered to have improved skid resistance and offer some noise reduction when compared with conventional hot mix asphalt mixes. this mixed type also offers superior rutting resistance, fatigue endurance, and durability. Do you see that?
Yes, I can.
And that was your understanding and view of the time of the use of SMA with a perpetual pavement, correct?
Yes, correct.
And when you say skid resistance in that paragraph, you're talking about friction levels, correct?
So friction numbers are a part of skid resistance. Skid resistance is more general term because there are other factors, but friction numbers are an indicator, one factor that impacts skid resistance.
Understood. But certainly what you were saying and understood was that as compared to the conventional designs, your view was that SMA had better skid resistance.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Okay, we can take that document down. You spoke yesterday, Dr. Uzorowski, about the feasibility.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Your question was it had better skid resistance than conventional designs. But we're not talking about a design when we're talking about skid resistance. I think we're talking about SMA, we're talking about a layer of asphalt, right? The corresponding question would be better skid resistance than the super pave asphalts that were traditionally used. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I don't think the question that you asked made sense in terms of what we've heard thus far.
Okay, well let me make sure that I've got the question and the answer clear. When I refer to conventional design, I'm talking specifically as compared to other surface layers other than SMA. Dr. Uzorowski, does that change your answer?
No, this is SMA is better than conventional asphalt mixes.
Correct.
Exactly.
Okay. Does that, Commissioner, does that?
That rephrases the question in terms of what I think makes sense.
Okay, good. Thank you. And my apologies if my question was unclear on that.
Yeah.
So you discussed yesterday, Dr. Uzorowski, the feasibility study that Golder had prepared, and I want to ask some questions about that. So am I correct that Gary Moore, on behalf of the city of Hamilton, had asked Golder for an opinion on the use of perpetual pavement with SMA, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And the objective of the feasibility study was for Golder to determine the feasibility of using perpetual pavement with SMA on the Red Hill Valley Parkway, correct?
Yes, correct.
And you understood that the city of Hamilton was relying on Golder for its expertise.
Yes.
And your conclusion from that feasibility study was that you recommended the use of perpetual pavement with SMA for the Red Hill, yes?
Yes, it's correct.
And you didn't qualify your opinion or recommendation in any way.
Sorry, what do you mean?
Well, you didn't say, you didn't make any qualifications to your recommendation that that perpetual pavement with SMA would be a feasible option and would be a recommended course of action for the design and construction of the Red Hill Valley Park, correct?
Oh, I think correct. We recommended that solution. The feasibility study showed that the perpetual pavement with SMA was feasible for that parkway.
Right. And in order to arrive at that recommendation, you had undertaken an analysis, an independent analysis of that consideration, yes?
Yes.
And you reviewed the necessary data and information that you had available to you to arrive at that recommendation.
Yes, it was based on cost analysis. Yes, life cycle cost analysis.
Yeah. And then ultimately you signed the feasibility report.
Yes, I did.
And you provided a copy of that report to the City of Hamilton.
Yes, I did.
I want to ask you about, as I understood it, that is the feasibility report that was prepared and signed in August of 2005, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay. And Mr. Lewis had asked you yesterday whether there was any doubt in your mind that after your meeting with Mr. Moore in January of 2005, that he wanted to use perpetual pavement with SMA surface course on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. And as I understood your answer, you were convinced that perpetual pavement with SMA would be the preferred course of paving the RHVP. But I just want to make sure I understand it. I take it that determination was only arrived at after you had completed your feasibility study in August of 2005, correct?
Yes, correct.
And it was only after Golder had made a recommendation in favor of it that the City of Hamilton decided to proceed, correct?
Yes, I understand that the city based their decision on the results of the feasibility study. Yes.
Okay. And indeed, if you had not recommended using perpetual pavement with SMA, you have no reason to believe that the City of Hamilton would not have gone ahead with it anyway, correct?
It's correct.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, once the feasibility study was completed, Golder was then engaged by the city to develop the project paving specifications.
Yes, that was in phase 2. Yes.
Yeah. And that included a consideration of the OPSS, the Ontario Provincial Standard Specifications, and special provisions prepared for the RHVP paving project. Oop. I just lost my camera. Thank you. Did you hear my question? I'm sorry, my camera just had a life of its own.
If you could repeat the question, I would appreciate.
Sure. I apologize.
There was a certain amount of distraction there.
I just wanted to be sure that the part of the development of the project paving specifications included a consideration of the OPSS, the Ontario Provincial Standard Specifications, and special provisions prepared for the paving project.
Yes, I have no right to change the OPSS specification, but I can develop special provision where I can recommend what can be added or changed, but to OPSS.
Right. And indeed, that's part of Golder's mandate was to develop and recommend the mixed design.
No, we don't develop mixed design. We could state that what type of mix, and then we indicated the type of asphalt cement, like PG grade asphalt cement. But the mixed design, that was up to the contractor or the consultant hired by the contractor to do this job.
Okay, perhaps I misspoke then. Certainly, it's the mandate to specify. Golder's mandate was to specify the specific components of the mixed design, aggregate, and the other things that go into the mix.
Oh, we would indicate that, for like we specify because there were a pretty significant number of different mixes depending on location and traffic loading, etc. So what mixes with what asphalt cement grade, and then what specification, particular specification should be followed, like for whether it was Marshall mix or super pave mix or SMA. And so for what specification to follow, that was in special provision. Yeah, it indicated what specification would be followed. So what mix type and what specification should be followed for those mixes.
Okay, and then when we're looking at those specific specifications for that mix, I take it there are a number of different aggregates that may be suitable for the mix, yes?
Oh, yes.
And as part of Golder's mandate to specify the aggregates, let's say, I take it that Golder could have insisted that only an aggregate that was listed on the DSM list be used. That's something that Golder could have chosen to do, yes?
Oh, we could have chosen, but the common approach was to identify the specification, and in this case was OPSS 1003. I believe it's November 2004 that would be used for aggregates, and that was the common practice used for municipalities.
Right. So you were comfortable that as long as the aggregate was complied with OPSS 1003, you were comfortable specifying an aggregate that was that met that specification, correct?
Yes, I was comfortable. I had a very high opinion about OPSS standards. I think they are one of the best in North America in country. And also, as I mentioned yesterday, I'm a member of the OPSS committee, so I know how, what scrutiny goes into developing of this specification.
Yeah, and it was not something that you felt was necessary that you needed to specify an aggregate that was on the DSM list, yes?
Yes, it wasn't a common practice for municipalities.
And you talked yesterday about the use of the Quebec demix aggregate, which was not, as I understand it, on the MTO's DSM, correct?
It's correct.
And before Golder was prepared to approve the use of this aggregate, I take it that you looked into the quality of the Quebec demix aggregate?
Of course, I did.
Yeah. And I think we looked at this yesterday. You were provided with the testing results of that aggregate from Dufferin in April of 2007.
Like initially, I was provided with the results from the quarry, from the mixed quarry, and it was in March.
Yes.
And we didn't accept it. I described yesterday why, because some of them were outdated. Not everything was included, and the testing was not done by the CCIL certified laboratory, which is required by OPSS 1003. So we did not approve it and requested the testing that is included in the OPSS 1003 specification should be done, all tests, and then it should be done by the lab that was certified.
Right.
With the standard.
And then when we looked at the testing results and maybe it just helped to pull those up, GOL Golder 1768. So this is the email dated April 23, 2007. and 7, I'm looking for the, you'll see there are attachments, and perhaps the attachments are what I'm looking for, GOL 1769 and 1770. Let's start with 1769. Yes. And 1770, if we can put that next to it, I think it has the chart. Yes. And Dr. Uzarowski, I think you looked at this yesterday and described these results as being, my notes say that you thought they were excellent and in fact rarely seen in terms of these results, correct?
Yeah, this was for the chips and 1.7 microdeval. This is excellent.
Okay. And then if we can then take that down. So this was provided to you on April 13, 2007. If we can just take that down. And as I understand it, a few weeks later, on May 8, 2007, you attended a site meeting. Minutes of site meeting number 7 can be found at Hamilton document HAM 7883. If we can just bring that up for a moment. This is the minutes of the site meeting number 7, dated May 8, 2007. You'll see that in attendance is 2 individuals, Mr. Audie and Mr. Rockwood from the City of Hamilton. And if you scroll down middle of the page, it appears that you are in attendance at this site meeting on behalf of Golder, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And if we move over, if we scroll to the next page, you'll see that under matters discussed under number 2, asphalt issues. And these minutes reflect a detailed discussion took place amongst all parties in order to solve outstanding issues pertaining to the acceptance of the applicable hot mix asphalt specifications. The following information was agreed to in regards to the outstanding asphalt issues. And sub A says the physical properties of the Quebec trap rock are all acceptable. You see that?
Yes, I can see.
And then and indeed at this meeting, I take it, Dr. Uzarowski, that you had indicated that the use of Quebec trap rock as the aggregate was acceptable?
Like I said that, those, I was very pleased with the results of the physical properties of this aggregate.
Yeah, and you communicated that to the individuals at this meeting, as it appears that these notes reflect, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And if I can ask you to look at GOL 1868. This is a fax that you send, Dr. Uzarowski, to Phillips Engineering, the City of Hamilton, and Dufferin on the same day, May 8, 2007. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And just so we're clear, Phillips Engineering, that is the contract administrator?
Yes, they were the CA, yes.
Yeah. And in this fax, in the second sentence, you say the aggregates meet the specified requirements, correct?
Yes, the aggregates, I looked in this fax that the aggregates used for super pave 19 and super pave 25. Yes.
Right. But you were saying that the mixes, the super paved mixes do not meet the volumetric requirements and are not acceptable, but the sentence before that says that the aggregates meet the specified requirements, correct?
The aggregates in those mixes, yes.
Okay. Now, I do want to understand the chronology of events relating, we can take that down, thank you, Mr. Registrar. I do want to understand the chronology of events relating to the mix design. And if I'm correct, if I could just ask you to look at Golder 1617. These are minutes of another site meeting. Dated July 10, 2007. And you'll see that in this meeting, both you and Mr. Delos Reyes are in attendance on behalf of Golder. You see that in the center of the list of attendees?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. And just scrolling to the next page, you'll see under number 2, asphalt issues. And the first heading is outstanding mixed designs approvals. And there it is recorded that Golder indicated that after only a quick glance, the SMA mixed design appears to be satisfactory. Golder will provide written confirmation of their analysis. Do you see that?
Yes, I can.
And at this point in time, July 10, 2007, Golder was generally of the view that the SMA mixed design was satisfactory, correct?
Yes, the mixed design was good. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just looking at GOL 1750. This is about just under 2 weeks later, Mr. Delos Reyes sends an email to you dated July 23, 2007. And he says, just to remind you, trial strip SMA is this coming Wednesday. Also, if you're going to issue written approval with reservation for the SMA mixed design, please include the SP19 mixed design. We've already given the verbal approval during the regular monthly meetings, just to confirm it in writing. Do you see that?
Yes, thank you.
And as I understand it, so you had already, Golder had already given at least verbal approval with respect to the SMA mixed design by this point in time?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and the issue around the reservation, as I think you said yesterday, was that it related to that ignition oven testing that had been performed, correct?
Yes, to aggregate breakdown during the ignition of testing.
Okay, we can take that down. Next document I wanted to ask you is about that test strip, which is found at a GOL 3082. You'll recall, Dr. Yuzrowski, we looked at this document yesterday. And I think, as I understood your evidence yesterday, I think what you said was it is not uncommon for a test strip to not meet specifications. That does happen, correct?
This is correct.
And I think you said it was a fairly regular occurrence for a test strip to fail.
Yeah, I think so. I can say.
And that in this particular case, you recommended that a new test strip be completed, yes?
Yes, I did.
And am I correct that just because a test strip may fail, that does not mean that the rest of the main line paving would not ultimately be acceptable? And as I understood your evidence, Dr. Wizarowski, I think what you said was, you know, what happens is you learn from the deficiencies that are identified from a test strip so that you can correct those deficiencies when you do the mainline paving.
Yes, this is right. The test strip is not to penalize the contractor, but to give them the opportunity to learn how to fine-tune the production, placement, compaction to meet the specifications. So that's just to help the basically not to penalize, but to help them to make sure that when they move to the main part or main line, they will incorporate those changes. So it will the quality will benefit.
Right. And again, so for that reason, just because a test strip may fail doesn't mean that it should be presumed that the rest of the main line would be unacceptable.
Yes, that's I said it would be at their own risk. So, yeah.
Right. And ultimately, you were content with the mainline paving and found it to be acceptable, correct?
Yeah, generally, yes.
Okay, we can take that one down. Now, I do want to look at Golder 1619, which is another site meeting. And I think we looked at, well, we looked at the reproduction of this in the OD yesterday, but this is the actual minutes of the site meeting number 10, dated August 21, 2007. And you'll see in the middle of the page that in terms of the list of attendees, you and Mr. Delos Reyes on behalf of Golder are in attendance, correct?
Yes, correct.
And Mr. Audi at the top of the page is in attendance on behalf of the City of Hamilton, correct?
Yes, correct.
And if I just ask you to scroll to the second page, you'll see that in the yes, the first bullet on the second page, Golder has completed their analysis and provided written confirmation indicating the SMA mix design is satisfactory. And the second bullet, Golder has completed their analysis and provided written confirmation indicating super paved 12.5 FC2 mix design is satisfactory. Do you see that?
Yes, I can.
And as I understood your evidence yesterday, although you were unable to locate a copy of Golder's written confirmation, I take it that there's no dispute that at some point prior to August 21, Golder had completed its analysis and had given written confirmation that the SMA mix design was approved, correct?
Yes, it's correct. This is what it shows, yes.
Yeah. And indeed, a copy of these minutes were sent to you a few weeks later, which can be found at GOL 1618. Where the August 21 minutes were in fact sent to you and Mr. Delos Reyes on September 10, 2007, correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And there was never any response to that to say, hey, wait a second, Golder hasn't provided its confirmation or written confirmation of its approval, correct?
That's correct. I don't have any this kind of records, no.
Correct. Okay, we can take that one down. But I'm being advised that we should mark that one as an exhibit, if we could. Should be exhibit 26. Okay, thank you. We can take that one down. And I now want to ask you, Dr. Uzarowski, about an email that was sent earlier in time in the beginning of August on August 9th, 2007. And we looked at that in OD number 3. Paragraph 120, image 58. Yes, paragraph 120, you'll see, Dr. Uzarowski, you were asked about this email yesterday, about an email that Mr. Audi had emailed to Mr. Hayner, Mr. Gamble, and Mr. Worry at Dufferin, advising that the Varennes demix aggregates have been approved for use in the SMA and Superbave surface course asphalt mixes on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. The trial batches for both mixed designs met the specified requirements. And you were asked, I know that Mr. Lewis had asked you yesterday to speculate as to why you were not copied on this email, but rather than speculating, as I expect we'll hear from Mr. Audi about this, is it correct, though, that by this time Golder had, in fact, approved the aggregate for use in the SMA?
I don't have records of approving the aggregate. I know that I don't have. I was not able to locate any record showing that we approved the aggregate.
Sure, but certainly, as we talked about, we can take this document down. Certainly, as we talked about, the aggregate was viewed to be acceptable by Golder as early as May 2007, correct?
We said the physical properties were acceptable.
Yeah. Okay. I do want to come back, if I could. We started I started these questions, Dr. Uzarowski, by asking you about the friction test results in 2007, October of 2007, conducted by the MTO. And I just want to come back to that point in time and ask you about the communications that you had with the MTO that led to that friction testing being performed, okay?
Okay.
And you were asked yesterday about the discussion that you had had with Chris Raymond at the MTO on July 31, 2007. And I think what I heard you say yesterday was that after hearing this information about Ontario, that quarry, using that Ontario trap rock from that quarry, you were convinced that you wanted to do friction testing once the RHVP was complete, correct?
Yes, it's correct. Ontario trap rock, and Chris mentioned this early friction issue. So yes, I was convinced I wanted to have friction testing done.
Right. And it was your recommendation. You said, I think, probably you recommended to the city that it agreed to have the MTO conduct the friction testing once the Red Hill had been completed, yes?
Yes, the city agreed to do the friction testing, yes.
Yeah, and you understood that in order for that testing to be done, which you wanted to do, it required getting the city's permission to do so, yes?
Of course, yes.
And you did get the city's permission, correct?
Yes, I did, yes.
And Mr. Lewis showed you yesterday a number of internal emails at the MTO, which seemed to discuss your request that friction testing be conducted. And if I could just go through those with you. It starts at OD number 4, image 53. Actually, pardon me, I think we need to go back to image 52. Yes, thank you. You'll see that at paragraph 116, there is a reference to September 27, 2007. You emailed Mr. Raymond about conducting friction testing on the RHVP. And you'll see in the last sentence of your email, you say, also as discussed with you before and with the City of Hamilton, could you please carry out the skid number testing on the RHVP pavement, right?
Yes.
And as the consultant, Golder, to the City of Hamilton, you're making that request to the MTO on behalf of the City of Hamilton, yes?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And then you were asked about the email from Mr. Raymond to Ms. Lane, and I recognize that you're not copied on these emails. These are just the internal emails between Mr. Raymond and Ms. Lane at the MTO. And I'm not asking you to speculate. I don't think that's useful. But in the second paragraph of that email, it says Ludimir is requesting friction testing, and the city does not have objections to the testing, but the city is not making a request to the ministry. You see that?
Okay, yeah, I can see it now. Yes.
Yeah. And that was correct, which was that the city did not have objections to the friction testing being conducted, and that you were requesting the friction testing. But I take it, as you said earlier, you're making that request on behalf of the City of Hamilton.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay. And that we can take that down. Paragraph 118, again, another internal email. You're not copied on this. Ms. Lane forwards Mr. Raymond's email to Mr. Kazmarowski and says, hi, Tom, I seem to remember we offered some monitoring of the Red Hill Creek Expressway perpetual pavement. Did that not include friction testing? Did you have any knowledge of the MTO monitoring the RHVP at this point in time?
Monitoring, unless she's talking about the monitoring station that was installed or constructed on next to the Red Hill Valley Parkway, but not other monitoring.
Yeah, she seems to be referring to, if she puts monitoring in quotes, referring to the Red Hill Creek Expressway perpetual pavement. In other words, specific to the pavement itself. I take it you don't know.
No, I don't. My understanding would be the monitoring station, because this is what I know was discussed. That monitoring station that was monitored the performance, the traffic and pavement performance on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. This would be my understanding.
Okay. And then the next paragraph, paragraph 119, Mr. Kazmarowski replies to Ms. Lane saying, yes, but we should have Ludomir instruct the city to either request the testing or at least approve Ludomir's request for testing and give permission for us to test on their facility. And I take it, I understand, Dr. Uzarowski, that you weren't copied on this email, but at this point in time, you knew that you had the city's approval for the MTO to conduct the testing pursuant to the request. Yes?
Oh, no, of course, the city was the owner. I had to get their approval to do anything on the road.
And you had already obtained that approval from the city?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And then at paragraph 120, Ms. Lane forwards Mr. Kazmarowski's email to Mr. Raymond saying, Chris, is the city of Hamilton in agreement with the testing? We don't need a letter of request, but we do need their approval. And again, you had obtained the approval to do the testing, so that wasn't an issue as far as you were concerned, correct?
That's correct.
And then paragraph 121, Mr. Raymond responds to Ms. Lane. And again, I recognize you are not involved in this exchange of communications, where Mr. Raymond is opining. He says, yes, the city is in agreement, but it's strange the city are not willing to write a request. I asked Ludomir to specifically send me a request from the city a few weeks ago. See that?
Yes, I can see.
And I just want to be clear, you don't have a specific recollection of speaking to Mr. Moore or anybody else at the city of Hamilton, specifically advising you that the city did not wish to make the request directly, correct?
No, I only recall that I got the permission to go ahead with the testing.
Right. And paragraph, I just wonder whether this may provide some assistance, and you can assist me with this, is paragraph 111, which is image 51. I'm sorry, it's image, it must be image 50, yes, thank you. Paragraph 111, on September 11, Mr. Raymond emailed Mr. Marcello with a copy to Ms. Lane about a telephone call with Dr. Uzarowski about the friction testing in Hamilton. He stated, Ludomir called me this afternoon regarding City of Hamilton friction testing we discussed this morning. He mentioned that there are very limited City of Hamilton staff around this week, including the project manager, so we may not get the request for a few days. I am informed that we would conduct the testing once the request is received. See that? And
yes, I can see.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering whether you had any knowledge or recollection of any practical or logistical problems of potentially getting a request directly from the city as a result of the absence of staff at that time.
No, I was not.
Okay.
No.
Okay. And then just going back to we had almost finished off the emails, the MTO emails at image 53, if we could go back to that. We had looked at the one referred to at paragraph 121, and the one at paragraph 122, Ms. Lane responded to Mr. Raymond. Maybe they are concerned about the results from a liability perspective. Anyway, we had agreed earlier this year to provide testing rather than money for instrumentation, which was their original request. Please coordinate with Frank. Do you see that?
Yes, I can see.
Am I correct that regardless of who requests the friction testing, whether it was Golder on behalf of the city or the city directly to the MTO, you understood that the results of that friction test would go to the city of Hamilton, correct?
Of course, yes.
There was no circumstance in which Golder would make the request of the MTO to conduct friction testing on behalf of the city of Hamilton, but then not share those results with the city, correct?
Well, yeah, of course, I would have to share.
Okay. If you could just give me 2 seconds, Dr. Yuzurowski, Commissioner, I expect to wrap up. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything in my notes. If I could just have a moment.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yuzurowski. Those are my questions. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Commissioner, Council for Dufferin is next, and I would just note that typically the morning break is at 11:30, which is 18 minutes from now. So I don't know, just for Council's benefit, I don't know how long you intend to be, if you're going to run through the break or not, just for good order's sake.
I'm not sure I can commit to exactly 18 minutes, but it should be roughly that amount of time.
Right.
Okay, then why don't we
I'm happy to start.
proceed with your evidence, your questioning before the break.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Yuzurowski. My name is Jennifer McAleer, and I am counsel to Dufferin Construction. And good morning. I just have a few questions for you. I'd actually like to start with the evidence that you gave regarding the compaction results. And you'll recall that Mr. Lewis asked you a series of questions yesterday with respect to the August 1st compaction results and also the August 11th and August 13th compaction results. All right, you're nodding. Perhaps, Mr. Registrar, if we could start by pulling up Golder 1718 and the native version of that Excel spreadsheet. So that's Golder 1718. Those are the compaction results for August 1st. Thank you. And if you could just scroll up to the top so that we can see that this is in fact August 1st. Make it a little bit larger. Great, thank you. And then if we could just scroll down to the bottom, please, first. Right. And you'll recall yesterday, Dr. Yuzurowski, you explained that there are different criteria that are applicable to the longitudinal joints as compared to the center line. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And the different descriptions of pavement, we have the outside edge, the center edge, and we have the center line. Am I correct that both the outside edge and the center edge are considered the longitudinal joints?
Yeah, they are close to the joints. Yeah, I would classify them the hands.
So when we're looking at the different criteria, when we're looking at the center edge and the outside edge, it's the criteria applicable to the longitudinal joints.
Yes, this is, yeah, that's right.
All right. And then, Mr. Registrar, if we could scroll back up to the top, because I want to look in particular at the Excel formula that's being used. So I don't know if everybody can see that, but if you click, Mr. Registrar, if you click on line 11, for example, all right, but you have to click into the the specification, so the last cell. Right, okay, good, yeah. And you need to drop down the actual formula so we can see the full formula. At the top, where we see the Excel formula. Yeah, in there. Perfect, thank you. All right, so Dr. Yuzerowski, I'm just gonna go through this with you so that everybody understands, in particular, Mr. Commissioner, and Mr. Commissioner, if you have any questions, please let me know. But the way I read this, Dr. Yuzerowski, is that, and Mr. Escher, I don't know if you can make that even a little bit larger, because I know the print's quite small and people might be struggling. No, can you actually call out the formula that's in the Excel spreadsheet? I don't know if you can do that.
Sorry, it's a native, so I can't really.
All right.
make
Well,
any-
I'll take us through it, and people can check after if they need to. So what this tells us is that the center line, Dr. Yuzerowski, the criteria is it is acceptable if it's greater than 93 and less than 97.5. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right. And there are two borderline criteria for the center line. It is 92.9, greater than 92.9 and less than 93 is a borderline finding. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's a second borderline, which is 97.6 to 98.5. Do you see that?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then finally, the rejectable is anything that is less than 92.9. Do you see that, Dr. Yuzerowski?
Yeah. I'm looking at this. Yeah, I can see it. Yes.
All right. So those are the criteria for the center line. And then just as you indicated, both the center edge and the outside edge are treated differently. That there is a borderline for anything that's greater than 91, but less than 91.5.
Mm-hmm.
And acceptable is anything that's over 91.5. Do you
Yes.
agree with that?
Yeah.
Rejectable is anything below 91.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So with that in mind, can we now then turn to the results for August 11th, Mr. Registrar, which is Golder 1685. The native version, please. And if we go, just want to make sure it's the right date. Yes, August 11th. And if we go to the bottom where the criteria is specified, you'll recall that Mr. Lewis put to you that the rejection criteria was different than it had been on the August 1st results. And you had said that you thought that was an error. Do you remember that evidence?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Well, I think you're correct. And I'm going to try and show you why. So if we go back up, Mr. Registrar, into the formula again. So if you click into any one of the correct, and I'll give you a moment to look at it, Dr. Yuzerowski, but I think you should be able to confirm that the formula is the exact same formula that was being used on August 1st.
Yes. Yeah. So the formula is different, and then what's in that row, whatever it is, there was an error. There was a typo, an error there.
Right. So just to be clear, the typo was not in the formula. The typo on the August 11th results was at the bottom of the spreadsheet where somebody had manually inputted the criteria. Is that correct?
Yes. It is.
Right. So the same formula is being used on August 1st that is being used on August 11th. Is that correct?
Yeah, it looks like that. Yeah, it looks correct. Yeah.
Right. So all of the results that we see on August 11th are correct.
Yeah.
Right. So if it says that something meant was acceptable, that a center line was in excess of 93 on August 11th, that would also be the same result on August 11th. Sorry,
Yeah.
on August 1st was the same on August 11th. And the rejectable had not changed. So rejectable on August 1st was anything less than 92.9, and August 11th, it was still anything less than 92.9. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There was a typo, error at the very bottom of this spreadsheet. Yes.
All right, because I think it was suggested to you that the criteria had changed. In fact, there were a number of results that were marked as acceptable that should in fact have been marked as rejectable if the old criteria had been applied. And we can see now that that's not the case. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
All right. And then if we were to look at the next test result, Mr. Registrar, for August 13th, that's Golder 1684. And again, the native version, please. And this is August 13th. So Dr. Yaroslavsky, this is the last day of the testing, correct? Last day of paving, I should say.
Yeah, item.
Right, and the last day of testing. And Mr. Registrar, if you can again hover over the document so that we can see the formula, please. And I'll just give you a moment, Doctor, but again, can you confirm this is the same formula that was used on August 1st and on August 11th?
Yeah, it looks the same, yeah.
All right, so we can take comfort, can we not, that these results are correct and they are consistent with the same formula that was used on August 1st?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Thank you. We can take that document down. All right, so I'd like to ask you some questions about the test strip. And yesterday you testified that the objective of a test strip is to test whether the contractor can produce, lay, and compact in compliance with the specifications. Do you remember giving that evidence?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I do.
All right. So I want to talk a little bit about the specific issues that were identified in the test strip that was done on July 25th. And it may assist if we actually pull up two emails. One is a document that's Golder 1736, Mr. Registrar. So that's Golder 1736.
Sorry, Council, what's the other one?
The other one is Golder 1734. And just while those documents are being pulled up, Doctor, as you said, it's not uncommon for a contractor to have some difficulty meeting the specified requirements on a test strip, correct?
Oh, yeah, definitely correct.
And in those circumstances, the expectation is that the contractor will learn from that experience. I believe those were your words yesterday, and that they might make some adjustments. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. So, all right. So, with respect to the thickness, as I understand it, the thickness of the mat was 32 millimeters instead of 40. Was that your understanding?
Yes, yes,
Right.
That's right.
And I take it that problems with thickness in a test strip, that's not an uncommon issue to arise with a test strip.
No, it's not. This is what the test strip is for. Yes?
Right. And that's something that a contractor can simply make an adjustment for.
Yes.
Right. You learn and you make the adjustment, correct?
Yes, that's as I mentioned, this is what the test strip is for, not to penalize but the contractor, but to let him adjust the production and placement and operation.
And then the second matter that is identified in that first email is that there's some sort of aggregate breakdown is the comment. And in your evidence yesterday, you attributed this to applying too much pressure in the compaction. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And you also indicated that that may in fact be linked to the fact that the mat was too thin. Do you recall?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And are those issues that a contractor can adjust, having done the test strip and learned from the results? Can the contractor adjust to correct those problems?
Of course, this is what it is for. Yeah.
And in this case, it looks like, given the results we looked at for August 11th and August 13th, that the contractor was in fact able to adjust the compaction, correct?
Yes, yeah, they adjusted, and I think, as I said in the paper, the Dufferin was responsive and adjusted the placement and the compaction, yes.
Now, looking at the second email, another issue that was identified was one with respect to the air voids. You see that?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. And I'm going to ask Mr. Register if you can pull up another document, which is Golder 1723. And I understand, Doctor, that these are the air void, or these are a number of test results that were done on August 1st. So the first day of the paving on the main line.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Are you able to tell us whether or not the air void results on that date are satisfactory?
Oh, these results, these air voids are good. They are 4.5%. This is good. They are good.
All right. So whatever the issue was with the air voids on the test strip on July 25th, the contractor has adjusted that, and the air voids are good on August 1st, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you had a note in, you can take that down, Mr. Register, thank you. Actually, before we go to that, you'll recall that Mr. Lewis had taken you to the contract addendum, which talked about the trial strip and the fact that if a trial strip was not acceptable, that it could be redone. Do you recall that yesterday?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And I'm going to suggest to you that the city actually has the discretion whether or not to require the contractor to redo the test strip. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
And the city could require that the contractor pull out the whole test strip and redo it. And they could also order that the contractor be responsible for those costs, correct?
That's correct.
But it's also true that the city could opt to allow the contractor to make adjustments and to proceed with the paving and continue to monitor the placement of the pavement. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And would you agree, Doctor, that that's in fact what happened in this case?
Sorry, what was that? It did happen, or it could happen?
That is what happened in this case, is that the contractor proceeded with the paving the next day. They weren't ordered to pull out the test strip, correct?
Yes.
And they proceeded with the paving on August 1st. And they ultimately made the adjustments to deal with all of the issues that we just went through on the test strip. Agree with that?
Yeah, I agree.
And in your notes for August 1st, you indicated that you were you looked at your notes and you were trying to understand what they meant, because there was a reference on August 1st to 4 hours of time incurred, and it just said test strip. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That in your notebook? And you testified, I think, that meant that you had been on site talking about the test strip on August 1st. Is that fair?
Yes, it is.
And I'm going to suggest to you that, in fact, you were on site talking to the contractor and having discussions about the adjustments that needed to be made given the test results. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is fair. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I anticipate that the evidence from David Hayner will be that if, in fact, the city had ordered Dufferin to pull out that test strip and redo the whole thing, that is only a day's worth of work. Do you agree with that? Or do you have any appreciation of that?
I do. It would have an impact on the schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, but the impact is quite minor, I would suggest. It's simply a day. Do you agree with that?
I think so.
Then finally, Doctor, I'd like to ask you a few questions about your conversation with Mr. Raymond on July 31st.
Yes.
Okay. And I just want to be clear about the reason you called Mr. Raymond. You called Mr. Raymond because you'd heard a rumor that Ontario Trap Rock had been removed from the DSM. Is that correct?
And no, Ontario Trap Rock was not removed from DSM, but was not, let's put it this way, that MTO did not want to use it in SMA mixes, but it still, I understand, it still remained on the DSM list, but not to be used for SMA.
Thank you. You're right. I overstated it. It was simply with respect to SMA. And if you hadn't heard that rumor, I take it you would not have called him on that day.
No, that was one of the reasons. I also had some concerns that the aggregate from the Demix quarry was not on the DSM list. So I just wanted to discuss it and have their input, their opinion.
Right, but you knew that. You knew that the aggregate from the DSM quarry wasn't on the DSM list. You'd known that from the first time that Dufferin suggested that aggregate be used, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'm going to again suggest to you that on July 31st, the reason you're calling Mr. Raymond, because you've heard the rumor about the Ontario Trap Rock.
Yeah, the main cause, time-wise, was because of the Ontario Trap Rock.
All right, and I take it you wanted to know, well, why would that be? Why would the ministry no longer approve Ontario Trap Rock for use in SMA? That would have been of interest to you.
Oh yeah, that was obviously of my interest. Why?
And you testified that at the end of the call, you were convinced to do friction testing. Remember that?
Yes, I do.
And I'm going to suggest to you that the reason you reached that conclusion was because at that point, you now knew that the ministry had concerns about early life friction results with SMA. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And you'd also been told that an aggregate that had previously been listed on the DSM for use with SMA had now been removed, right?
So again,
for use with SMA.
For use SMA, it was not. It remained there, but it was not used in SMA. Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to suggest to you that based on that call, you would have decided to do friction testing no matter which aggregate was being used on this project.
So I think, yes, I wanted to test early life friction on that pavement. I wanted to test it, yes.
Yeah, and you agree with me, it wouldn't matter which aggregate was being used. You wanted to test.
So the first, I definitely wanted to, by the end of that conversation, or I know, maybe not by the end, but as the result of this conversation, I knew I wanted to test the friction on the as early to check the early life friction on the Red Hill Valley Parkway.
Right, because Ontario trap rock, which had previously been approved, had now been pulled off for the use with SMA.
Yes.
And that caused you concerns.
Like, okay. Like, I had nothing to do with Ontario trap rock. That was SMA. That was ministry decision. So, their decision, but I wanted to, I think it was a very reasonable step to address this. So if I test it, then I will know what the initial friction is, because I understood, I think now, that Ontario trap rock was removed because of early friction as concerned. So that would, at least this would give me the answer of, and the indicator of this early life, the friction. So yes, I think definitely Ontario trap rock had an impact on my decision. On my desire, not decision, because the decision was from the ministry. That the fact that I wanted to test the friction.
Thank you, Doctor. Those are all of my questions.
Thank you.
Well, I think we are at our break. We'll take a 15-minute break, and back at, what will it be? 52, 8 minutes before noon. Thank you.
Thank you.
52.
Okay, I think you have the podium, Ms. McIver.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Hello, Dr. Uzarowski. My name is Heather McIver, and I am counsel for the Ministry of Transportation. I'm just going to ask you a few questions about your version of events and the points that you've raised so far. And if you would like me to clarify anything or speak slower, just feel free to let me know.
Okay.
Registrar, if you could please pull up document MTO 1265, I would appreciate it. And so, Dr. Uzarowski, this is Mr. Raymond's note about your discussion with him of July 31st, 2007. And so you told us that at the time you spoke to Mr. Raymond, you wanted to gather as much information about the aggregate in question as possible because it was not on MTO's DSM list. Is that correct?
Yeah, I wanted input on from the MTO because this aggregate was not on the DSM list. Yes.
Okay, and then just to clarify, at the same point in time, you had heard a rumor about the Ontario trap rock, the issue that the ministry had identified with Ontario trap rock, correct?
Yeah, I heard that it was no longer allowed for SMA. Yes.
Okay.
There was a post on using Ontario trap rock for SMA.
Right, okay. And so during your phone call with Mr. Raymond, I take it that he confirmed that that was in fact the case with the Ontario trap rock. Is that right? They were no longer using it as for SMA?
Yeah, I think so, yes.
Okay, and at that time, did your view on the appropriateness of the DSM list change? And maybe I'll rephrase. You spoke.
Yeah.
You spoke yesterday about the processes that are involved in vetting an aggregate for MTO's DSM list, and so I take it that your views on the DSM list remained favorable at that time.
Yes, I have a respect and for MTO selection and the placement of material on the DSM list.
Okay, great. And in on July 31st, 2007, during your conversation with Mr. Raymond, you noted yesterday that at that specific time you had no basis on which to reject the demix aggregate that was proposed for the paving to start the next day. And you spoke to the fact that you had contact with Mr. Fleury in Quebec, who provided you with reassuring information about its performance. And you spoke about receiving these lab results that you considered excellent. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. And so I assume that in your discussion with Mr. Raymond, I assume you mentioned these factors in addition to the fact that the aggregate was not on the DSM list?
I don't recall details what we discussed. Whether I told him about the result, I probably shared my concern that the aggregate was not on the DSM list. Of course, I would prefer, but I don't recall whether I told Mr. Raymond about the results. I don't recall these details.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Do you recall, Dr. Uzarowski, about whether you expressed any significant concern about the aggregate or whether your request was for sort of an additional assurance about its quality.
I think my concern was, this aggregate was not on the DSM list. I would prefer if it was. I work, in the past on, with project where the aggregates were. So it was, that was my concern. I didn't go, I don't think I didn't go into details, just express my concern.
Okay, fair enough. And so this document, Mr. Raymond mentions that at the very end, a possible outcome is that the City of Hamilton could make a request for friction testing. And we know that that request was ultimately submitted by you first in September. And that would have been after the paving started on the Red Hill Valley Parkway. Is that correct?
That request was, if it was on September the 17th, it was after paving was completed.
Okay.
The SMA was completed on August the 13th, so it was completed.
Okay, all right. And Dr. Uzorowski, had you previously requested that MTO carry out any friction testing in other contexts, on other work that you had been involved in?
No, I don't recall any.
Okay. But fair to say that you were familiar with the brake force trailer and the type of testing that would be conducted on the Red Hill Valley Parkway?
Oh, yeah, I had some, I would say general knowledge about it.
Okay. And Registrar, could we please pull up document Golder 3513? Okay, and so this is a document that my friend, Mr. Liederman, took you to earlier today, and Commission Counsel, Mr. Lewis, took you to this yesterday. This is the email in which Mr. Raymond is providing you with the test results from the brake force trailer testing of the Red Hill Parkway. And so you noted yesterday that this was the complete package, the complete information that was provided to you from Mr. Raymond, along with the two testing printouts. Is that correct?
Yeah. The email, this email, and two test results summary in an Excel format. Yes.
Okay. And so fair to say that there's no application of engineering principles or a report analyzing these results that was drafted by MTO or provided to you.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay. And Mr. Raymond asks to please pass the results on to those involved with the project. And in your view, that's exactly what you did. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And you have already said that you viewed the results as acceptable and that you were pleased with them. When you pass them on to those involved with the project, either in email or during your subsequent discussions, I take it that no concerns were raised on their end either.
Yeah, I sent an email with just the results only, and then I believe I follow with a phone call. And no, I didn't I probably pass that. I consider them acceptable. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And so fair to say, at that time, after you have reviewed the results and discussed with your clients, there's no reason to express any ongoing concern to Mr. Raymond, is there?
You're right. No, there was no reason.
Okay, and you didn't express any concern to Mr. Raymond about the Red Hill Valley Parkway at that time, did you?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay, Registrar, if we could pull up the test results briefly. It is in overview document 4, and I'll start with image 61. Okay, thank you. And so, Dr. Uzrowski, my friend asked you earlier about the nature of this printout, and you confirmed that SBL1, which is stated at the top, is a reference to the southbound lane 1 on the Parkway. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and if we go to the leftmost column, I see that there is a DIST. Is it your understanding that that stands for distance?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so if we're looking at a distance starting at 0 and continuing down into the last column, the last row, it says 3.815. Am I correct in interpreting that as 3.815 kilometers?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and so that would have been the section of southbound lane 1 that was tested during this process. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And then, Registrar, if we could move on to image 62. Thank you very much. And so similar questions with this. You've identified this as the result for southbound lane 2. And then I take it the leftmost column, DIST, again, is distance. Is that fair?
Yes, it is.
And then starting at 0, ending at 3.793, that would represent a distance of 3.793 kilometers of the southbound lane that was within the scope of this test. Is that right?
Yes, it's right.
Okay. And so ultimately, looking at these test results, I would be accurate in saying that at this time, only 2 of the 4 lanes of the highway were tested for approximately a section of about 3.8 kilometers. Is that right?
Yes, it's right.
Okay. And so, Dr. Uzrowski, I know that you noted that you didn't have concerns that the city and those you passed the results along to did not have concerns with the results. Presumably, if there were concerns, is arranging for further friction testing, for instance, by a private company, is that something that you would consider?
Oh, if they had concerns.
Right.
Then, but they didn't.
Right, okay. And if they had concerns and you went that route, I assume that, and of course, subject to your client's instructions. I assumed that one option would be to prepare a professional report analyzing these friction levels and applying professional expertise. Is that fair?
It probably is, but I don't know to speculate. This testing, in my opinion, was to evaluate friction at initial friction at early life of the pavement.
Right.
So I wanted to have this indicator what it is.
Right. Right. Okay. And I certainly I have heard you that because there were no concerns, it was unnecessary to consider anything further, and I'll leave it at that. Now, you mentioned as well that in terms of the application process for approval on the MTO's DSM list, you were aware that skid testing was involved as part of that process, correct?
To place the aggregate on the DSM list, yeah, there was, PSV and friction testing. Yeah, I think for a period of 2 years, yes.
Okay, all right. And you said yesterday that you became aware that the DMIX aggregate had qualified for the DSM list in 2009 or 2010. So I appreciate that you did not know the Red Hill Valley Parkway was tested as part of that process, but you would have known that there was further information about this aggregate that had been collected. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, my understanding was that if the aggregate is placed on the DSM list, that obviously these two requirements would have to be met. So PSV tested and friction tested. So so when I noticed that the aggregate was on the list, so I was positive, or I anticipated that these values were tested and passed.
Right. Okay. Dr. Zbrowski, you also, my friend, Mr. Liederman asked you earlier today about, in general, about your note-taking practices, and I believe you said that typically your practice was to include any sort of material significant events in your notes, and that has helped you refresh your memory for the purposes of this inquiry. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, but I'm sure you would agree that not every little detail is included in your notes, or generally speaking, in anyone's notes. It's difficult to include every specific detail. If you, I'm sure you would agree, if you were to run into a colleague or an MTO employee that you knew at a conference or whatnot, who asked you for contact information, that wouldn't necessarily make its way into your notebook, would it?
No.
And probably, I'm going to suggest that the same is probably true if, someone at the MTO reached out to you via telephone and you had a brief discussion about contact with the City of Hamilton. That likely wouldn't make it into your notebook, would it?
No, if it was just minor thing, probably not.
Okay. And then, to that end, if it was a brief encounter quick conversation, I'm sure it's fair to say that 8, 10, 12 years later, you may not necessarily recall that interaction. Is that, would you agree?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Dr. Zabrowski, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Roberts, I think you have the podium.
Thank you, sir.
And just before we begin, you'd said that you need about an hour. That will probably take us past the 1 o'clock time, which we normally break. I think because it's Friday afternoon, perhaps there would be a preference amongst council to continue until you're through, unless you have a concern with that.
No, I think that's fine. And my friends have been so efficient. I anticipate actually that we should finish about 1.
Even better. Thank you very much.
Dr. Zabrowski. I want to take you back to a beginning point, the beginning of your testimony. If I register, can I please call up Golder 1580? Dr. Zabrowski, yesterday, Mr. Lewis took you through a version of your CV that I think was a fairly early one. This is an updated version, which I understand to be 2018, I think. I don't propose to be long here, but I wonder if you could take us through some of your experience. And what I want to look at is your affiliations with different organizations. So you've got a number listed here. And can you please tell us about what other organizations you are a member of?
Oh, I'm a PhD in Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, a member of Canadian Technical Asphalt Association. Actually, last year I was elected to honorary membership. I'm also and I think it's not. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Waterloo, and also I am a member of the board of directors at CPAT at the University of Waterloo. CPAT is Center for Pavement and Transportation Technology, and as here you see it's CTAA. So I've been a member of CTAA since probably 1995, and Transportation Association of Canada. I'm a member of the Soil and Materials and also Pavement Committee. And because of my heavy involvement at airports, I've been a member of Federal Aviation Administration in the US AAPTP program, which is Airport Asphalt Pavement Technology Program, AAPTP. So I was, but this program ended a few years. So, and plus, asphalt recycling and Reclamation Association. So I think these are my probably main involvement now.
You mentioned in the course of your testimony that you're on the OPSS committee.
Oh yeah. I since sorry, I forgot about this. Since 2019, I've been a member of OPSS committee for OPSS MUNI, so the OPSS Municipal Pavements Committee, where I represent CEO, Consulting Engineers of Ontario.
Okay, and did I understand that you're also a representative Consulting Engineers of Ontario?
Yeah, I represent there. Of course, I'm a member of CEO, and I represent at OPSS. I represent CEO.
Okay, and you've told us you're an adjunct professor at University of Waterloo. What do you teach?
I teach. I taught courses, asset management and pavement design and construction.
And is that your only? Sorry.
And also, I also was teaching pavement design and construction course at McMaster University in Hamilton.
And in the course of your work with these universities, have you supervised any PhD theses?
Oh yeah, I was, let's say, in the PhD I was an outside professor for a number of PhD students. So I think it was probably about 6 and 2 master students. So 2 master and probably about 6 PhD students.
Thank you. And your title is described as Senior Pavement and Materials Engineer Specialist. Since most of us don't really know what that is, can you take us through what your expertise is?
I've been involved 47 years in pavement and materials area. So it is pavement evaluation. So it starts with pavement evaluation, pavement design, pavement maintenance, construction maintenance, specification development, this and materials. So materials cover not only asphalt technology, but also asphalt, concrete, granular materials, you name it, whatever is related to pavement technology type of materials. Then this is my area. This is I've been involved, including recycling and some innovative materials. So this aspect.
Is this for just roads, or is this also for airports?
Oh, I would say it's roads, but my main area of involvement is airports. So airports, not airport design, it's airport pavement and materials. So everything says evaluation, design, construction, and maintenance. But mainly airport is my main area.
Okay, and I understand that you've got a designation from the Ministry of Transportation, MTO.
Yes, I have designation for pavement design of high complexity.
What does that mean?
So this is the design for high complexity pavement. So mainly pavements for high traffic, carrying mainly heavy traffic and high speed.
And if I'm remembering correctly, you actually have experience designing some tracks for race courses as well.
Oh yeah, that's additional. Yes, so whatever is related. So I did also racetracks. Racetracks. So it's like it's not only airports, municipal pavements, but also industrial pavement, including ports, and as you mentioned, racetracks. So whatever is related to pavement and materials.
And I don't propose to take you through this in detail, but Registrar, if I can turn up image 4. Dr. Uzorowski, I wonder if you can sort of take us through some of the, just identify some of the larger projects you've worked on.
Oh, so at the top is pavement and materials technology review and updates. So I did it for a number of large municipalities, like Maine, the city of Hamilton, the 3 phases. Then city of Toronto, I updated from 2016 to 17, they're all paving and material specifications. And, the other large municipalities like region of Niagara, region of Waterloo, also not only in the province, but in our province, but also in other provinces, city of Moncton. And here is also Toronto Transportation, but my previous involvement also from the Payment of Materials Technology Review, and a lot of large municipal and provincial projects in Canada, USA, and South America. So, and not only city of Hamilton or city of Toronto, but also your consortium, TTC, number of highway projects for MTO, including QEW, Highway 401. It was forensic investigation, Highway 401, Highway 404. I designed pavement for Highway 404. So, over so many years, a large number of large projects, but at the same time also some small or medium-sized projects. But it's hard to describe in a short period of time. I will have to go probably through about 20-something pages with my main projects, and of course my passion, which are airports. So I did airports across the country, from basically Newfoundland and Labrador to British Columbia, and then from the US border to the north, including Iqaluit, Inuvik, and you name it, wherever it is. And also some airports in the States. I did Oakland Airport in California. And so airports basically across North America and in Europe.
Thank you. And if we go towards I'm not going to take you any further through that. Thank you for that overview. But if you go further on, you've got a long list of publications. And again, let me see if I can find the image for it.
I think I can admit that my CV is not updated because there are only 7 technical papers. By now, I probably have about 110 technical papers on this subject that I wrote, and probably about 250 presentations, so on.
Thank you. Registrar, can you please pull up image 10? I think that's the one I want to look at. No, next one. There we go. Thank you. So this is a beginning list, and you just said that it's not complete.
Yeah, I apologize. I didn't updated this thing. It would be probably significantly above 100.
Thank you. Now it looks as though these are publications through the Canadian Technical Asphalt Association and the Canadian, and the Transportation Association of Canada.
Yeah, mainly yes, CTA, TAC, but also other agencies. I did a lot for airports that would be SWIFT, and some in the US, including some for Transportation Research Board in the US. But probably the majority would be CTA and TAC.
Okay, and you've been taken through a couple of your reports, and I'll go to one in a minute. But can you just explain? Because these are a lot of papers. Can you explain the purpose of writing these papers?
I think it's important because if you write a paper, you share the knowledge with the young generation and with people in the industry, and this is what I really enjoy doing. And at the same time, you learn. You attend a conference, you share the knowledge, you have a conversation with you ask a lot of questions about this, and at the same time, you do the same to other people. They present, you learn a lot. So it's not only after you complete school and this is it. This is like continuous educational, building your level of knowledge and also sharing the knowledge with the young generation and with other people. So that's that's I think a very important part of my activities.
And who's the audience? Who are you sharing the knowledge and experience with?
Oh, but the audience is very wide. It's like it's other the owners, other consultants, contractors, suppliers, and a lot of students, a lot of young people. So very wide audience. So basically, I would say, you know, everybody involved in this particular industry would attend or try to attend those conferences.
Thank you. I'm going to move to a different document. So I want to just go through and take you to an example of one of those papers that you were taken to this morning. So Registrar, if I could please ask you to pull up Hamilton 328.
Jennifer, pardon me. Should we make his CV an exhibit 27?
Thank you. Yes, please. Before we go to the next document, could we please mark Dr. Uzorowski's CV as exhibit 27, Commissioner?
Done?
Thank you. Thank you. Registrar, can you please pull up Hamilton 328? That's interesting. Is it possible to show that without all the notes showing? Or is that just the way it is? That's curious. My version doesn't look like that.
Sorry, that's the way how it is.
Okay. So I take it this paper was in fact finalized, and we just don't have it up. So I apologize for that black line version here, Dr. Uzorowski. I just want to look at this for a minute. So this was a paper entitled Innovative Comprehensive Design and Construction of a Perpetual Pavement on the Red Hill Valley Parkway in Hamilton. And this was, who is it published through?
I think it was CTAA, definitely CTAA, and possibly also TAC. I'm pretty positive it was CTAA. I'm not sure about whether it was presented at TAC. Canadian Technical Ushers Association.
Thank you. And what was the purpose of this paper? Was it consistent with as you described before?
Yes, so you know, basically, as I mentioned, you know, like sharing the knowledge and also the knowledge about design and construction, but also some aspects or some difficulties that we had to deal with. I realized that not all of them are included in this paper, but that is perpetual payment was a relatively new idea in the country. So, you know, share it with the public or within the industry how it was done, and also from the construction point of view, the aspects that we face. And actually, that paper, when we presented this thing at TAC, it got a lot of interest, a lot of questions. So obviously, I think it was you know, beneficial for us and also beneficial for the industry, for the audience to see, you know, what problems we had, how we dealt with them from all possible aspects.
If I could, sorry, if I could just jump in. If you were looking for the final version, was I correct? Is that what you were looking
yes.
for? Okay, and that's the one that I took Dr. Uzorowski to this morning.
Thank you.
This one is the version with Mr. Moore's track changes.
Okay, that's confusion. Thank you.
Yeah, and so it is Ham 13032 is the final version. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. That's helpful. A little less messy. Registrar, if you could please pull up the document just referenced by Mr. Lewis.
Sorry, I'm just gonna have to ask Mr. Lewis to repeat that call out.
Yeah, that's Ham 13032.
So you were asked about what the fact that you. Sorry, can I just?
Sorry, Council, it just wasn't popping up for me, so I just had to restart it. I have the document, I just need to restart.
It's perhaps an obvious point, Dr. Uzarowski, but I take it the point of this paper is not to a discourse on the challenges of early age friction.
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Uzarowski and Commissioner, I'm going to have to impose on your patience. I'm going to go back through a number of points that were raised yesterday, and I will try and do it as briefly as I can.
Sure.
I would like to go to the feasibility report, which is RHV 935, Registrar. Thank you. Forgive me, I've got to go to the right image. Image 24, let's try. Table 6. Great, thank you. You were taken through this table yesterday by Mr. Lewis. And I just want to just go to one point here, is that this is the one where I think your evidence is that it anticipates a full Millen resurface at year 21. Is that what that says?
Yes, I see this. Yeah, mill. Yes, mill. So this is the idea of perpetual pavement to do periodical resurfacing. So anticipated, yeah, 21 mill 40 and overlay 40.
Would you have expected to achieve that longevity if you did none of the maintenance identified earlier in that column?
This is why it is stated in this table that some maintenance is required. So
Phone caller.
Sorry.
Apologies. I thought that had been turned off. Please proceed.
Sorry, Dr. Uzarowski, let me repeat the question. Would you expect to achieve the longevity of the 21 years before the first mill and pave if you did not do the maintenance that's identified in this in this table?
So, there are a number of factors that have to be considered. Like, maintenance is one of the critical factors, because the day the pavement construction is completed, the pavement starts to deteriorate. So it is like, with any other structures. So it is critical to provide timely maintenance. And we assume that, some initially, I see a route and seal cracks, and patching. By routing and sealing cracks, we assume a few years, probably, 3 to 4 years, you can extend the life of the pavement, and also doing timely other stuff like patching. So, maintenance is necessary for and necessary treatment to get the right life of pavement, and also at the same time to make sure that, because this pavement is designed for a particular level of traffic, so the traffic is as designed, and also that there is no what we call overloading. So, if it's not only the number of vehicles, but also the weight of vehicles, and this is that can be sometimes particularly destructive, because the damage caused by overloaded vehicles goes to the power floor. So this is that can be one of the critical factors, and I don't know whether it's a time to mention this thing, but we observe a significant number of overloaded vehicles on that parkway.
Okay, so just to, if I'm understanding you correctly, to recap, so if you're going to achieve that sort of life expectancy that you've identified here, you're going to want to make sure you do the maintenance. It's also going to be affected by the number of vehicles, whether they're overloaded, and do I have all of those factors, number of vehicles and whether the vehicles are overloaded?
So so this basically, it is one thing is proper pavement maintenance, the number of vehicles, overloaded vehicles, and unfortunately on that particular parkway, another impact was very significant. Impact was flooding. The road was flooded twice, so it had a very significant negative impact on performance.
Okay, well, I think we'll get to that evidence later on in the story here.
Okay.
Okay, so you can pull that down, Registrar. I want to go, please, to Golder 3741. This is the perpetual pavement design study phase 2. If we can go to image 2, please. There we go. So if I can just understand this. So it appears that there is an existing design for pavement, and then what are you doing to the, well, let me just cross, is there an existing design for the pavement on the Red Hill Valley Parkway when you were engaged to do your provide your design recommendations?
Yeah, before I was asked about perpetual pavement design, the pavement was or had been designed for the Red Hill Valley Parkway, but that was a conventional deep strength pavement. And the entire Red Hill Valley Parkway was divided into 3 sections. And the pavement, this conventional pavement, deep strength pavement, was designed by Soil Mat. 1 section and 2 sections were designed by Peter McCollum. But when and that pavement included everything. When we got involved, it was perpetual pavement. It was only the asphalt portion of the pavement. So on the majority of the road, not only the earthquake, but also granular layers, including subbase and base. They've been already done. Maybe not everywhere, but on some sections. Subbase was probably done everywhere. Granular materials, I would have to check. So we had to adjust the pavement for that different thickness of asphalt, particularly that the structures were done, the clearance was fixed. So we couldn't change the final elevation because otherwise would screw up the clearance. So we had to design the pavement to maintain the same elevation, but to go down, provide a little bit, a significantly thicker pavement structure within what was already done. So we designed that part of asphalt. This is what we call perpetual pavement, but this design was our design was only for the asphalt. And of course, with some impacts of granular layers, so we had to scrape some of them.
And I think, and does this design below with the perpetual pavement, does that reflect the design that you ultimately arrived at for the Red Hill Valley Parkway pavement?
So at the end, we had to consider what was existing, sometimes to remove some piece of the existing, and then at how much asphalt. So at the end, you had sufficient structure, or we call it a structural number, to support the anticipated traffic loading over a period of 50 years.
And if I understood your evidence yesterday accurately, the key element in the perpetual pavement is this SP19 rich bottom mix layer. So
yes, yeah. So this is the base, how you design the perpetual pavement. You start from the bottom, so you design the ridge bottom layer that incorporates a rich RBM, ridge bottom mix, that offers excellent resistance to fatigue cracking, fatigue endurance. Offers excellent fatigue endurance or resistance to cracking.
Okay, thank you. And your evidence is that you prepared the specifications and including special provisions, and I'd like to go to those. That would be, I think, image 5. So you've talked a little bit about the specifications. So first of all, these are specifications for all of the different mix types, and the mix types are identified in the left column.
Yes, SMA is FC2. So, whatever is in the top on the left column, this is for, these are the mix types, yes.
Okay, and what specifications or OPSS are relevant to the SMA, because that's the one we're really focused on here.
SMA, that would be OPSS 1151 and OPSS, so it's like 1151, not 1150 because this is Marshall. It would be 310 for construction. 1103 is, this is emulsion. 1101 would be for asphalt cement that we incorporated. 1003 is for aggregates, and 1001 is like, material specification but general. So this would this specifications.
Thank you. And there's 2 special provisions. Are either of them relevant for the SMA mix?
No. So the first one, special provision for mixed types. So that was actually the special provision. We call it SP1, the first special provision, because that would be identify what mixed types we wanted where, and those mixed types, what asphalt cement they would have to incorporate. So I think overall we developed, as far as I remember, like 6 special provisions, but that was special provision number 1. The other one, City of Houston special provision number 6, that was use of steels like in HR1 mix, also used on the Rectory Valley Parkway, but not on the main line, was one of the usual one. Maybe I would have to, you know, refresh my memory. That can be or the shoulder or one of the residential pavements. So it wasn't the main line.
Okay, let's just go, if we could, to the special provision for mixed types, which I think is special provision 1. Registrar, could you please pull up Golder 3742? Is this the, do I have that right, Dr. Uzrowski? Is this the one that's attributable to the SMA? Just look.
Yeah, so this is that's SP1. So this one includes mixed types. So it starts with so main line, okay, including track climbing lanes. So this includes SMA, and then what type of asphalt cement and other layers, and then there are other locations. It's under the same project, but not really the main line. Sometimes not really perpetual.
Okay, let's just stick with the SMA one. So it looks as though you're specifying a particular asphalt cement. Can you tell us what that is and why it's relevant?
We specified performance graded asphalt cement 70 minus 28. It's a very high quality asphalt cement. 70 is the high end temperature, minus 28 is the low end temperature, and because the rule of thumb is if you add both and if it's more than 92, then you have to use polymer. So we required high polymer content in this mix in order to get enhanced rutting resistance and fatigue endurance. So that's a really high quality asphalt cement that can resist, rutting and cracking.
Thank you. And let's then go, if we could please, to the OPSS specification 1003. Am I right that that's the one for the aggregate? And I think
1003 is for aggregates to be used in hot mix asphalt.
And Registrar, may I please ask you to turn up 39, Golder 3905. Okay, there's lots of detail in here. Dr. Uzrowski and Commissioner, I'm sure you'll be delighted to learn. I'm not taking the witness through all of it. But I do want to pull up the table 5, and that is, I believe, image 13. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Uzrowski, I wonder if you could please take us through this. As I understand that this is basically the key of the requirements for the coarse mix asphalt for a number of mixes, including SMA.
But sorry, I have to make a correction because this table is for SMA 19, which is the binder. We would have to go to another table, which is
sorry.
SMA 12.5.
Okay, hold on, let me find it. This is what happens if as a lawyer, I try to pretend I'm a pavement and materials engineer. Okay, is that table 6 then? Next page.
For course, I use super brief course.
Super pay.
FC2, yeah, FC2. FC2. Yeah, this is for course aggregate super pay surface course. I think I'm looking for SMA where it is.
Maybe is it a table 4?
That's or maybe because super paste. Because basically these are the same, this would be the same requirements because this is the surface course. So you can see here in this table, the requirements. Oh yeah, this would be the same because microdeval is 10. So these are the requirements for the aggregate, for the quarried rock. So you see this loss by washing, absorption, flat and elongated particles, petrographic number. This is freeze thaw and microdeval. So these are some main characteristics of the aggregate. And if you look in the second column from the right, this is trap rock. So the rock that we use on the Reckley Valley Parkway is the trap rock type. The Demix aggregate is the trap rock. So this is why I said that the results that I don't know if this comment, you see the requirement is for microdeval, for instance, 10. Our results were not our results, but what Dufferin submitted was 1.5. So excellent. Another petrographic number 120. We had 100. Oh, they had 100 or 101. So really, I would say excellent. I want to say excellent results.
So we've got Commission Council on the screen. So Mr. Lewis.
I was just wondering if we had to get the right table.
Yeah, I think we do.
Make sure. I think it's table 4.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Which is image
12.
12.
Image 12.
If that's the right one, I just was on our own databases.
Thank you.
Oh yeah. Sorry about that.
Right. It's my error, Dr. Uzorowski. Please forgive me. As I say, it's the problem that happens when a lawyer tries to pretend to be an engineer. There we go.
But basically, the requirements are the same for FC2 and here for SMA. So you see for SMA, because we had SMA 12.5 and DSM.
Right. Got
SMA 12.5. So the requirements, it's a quarry rock, trap rock. So then you can see, loss of washing. So it's like absorption. This is nothing unusual here, but okay, flat and elongated, it depends on the method of crushing. We had very low flat and elongs. Petrographic number 120. The result, as I mentioned, was I think 100 and 101. So it indicates, excellent values. And particular microdeval abrasion. This is for coarse aggregate. The limit was for this type of rock was 10, and what Dufferin submitted was about 1.5. I think 1.5, 1.7. When we tested, it was 2.5. So really, excellent result. I would say rarely seen that good number.
I'll get you there, Dr. Uzorowski. Here's my point before that I want to ask you is, were you concerned that if you relied on the OPSS specification and not the DSM, that somehow the end resulting aggregate would be of a lesser quality?
So so the one thing I wanted to have, the aggregate of good quality. So in terms of these characteristics, but at the same time, I would like to, as I mentioned yesterday, so that was microdeval and LA abrasion, etc. But also, I would like to know polishing characteristics, because this is important, and field performance. So, what Dufferin sent us, that was about this, for this aggregate, was CPP of 0.9, which is also, which indicates excellent resistance to polishing. And actually, they stated that this aggregate is used as a reference material by NTQ, which emphasizes how good the number was.
Okay, so my understanding here that in addition to whether the physical laboratory results were achieved, you wanted to verify the field experience of the aggregate.
Yes, this is why I called, and I knew this results, but I wanted to have like additional confirmation about their opinion about the aggregate. So I called MTQ, Daniel Fleury, to talk about this, and also, you know, some indication about field performance. And, you know, I was informed that this aggregate is used on high volume roads. Yes. So one of the best aggregates in Quebec used on high volume roads. So at least this was in my notes. I probably would get more information, but this is what I put in my notes.
Okay, so I just want to stay on that point. We can come off this document, Registrar. Thank you. I just want to dwell on that conversation with MTQ. First of all, can you tell us what MTQ? I'm understanding that's the Ministry of Transportation for Quebec. Is that correct?
Yes, MTQ is, yeah, Minister of
Okay.
Quebec, yes.
And what do you know about MTQ?
Oh, I think they are one of the leading agencies when it comes to pavement and materials. Like, you know, I have great respect for MTO and their expert and their expertise, but also MTO, I know some people there. I actually, you know, years ago, I did a research together with MTQ on asphalt wrapping, but also I know that, you know, top people for pavement and materials, Guy Tremblay, Pierre Langlois, Michel Paradis, Daniel Fleury. So these are the people very, very well known, and they publish a lot of, you know, some very significant papers on the quality of asphalt. And I think they were like MTU, in my opinion, MTO, MTQ are probably the leaders in the country. I don't want to offend other agencies because I work at a number of provinces, but I value their expertise.
Thank you. Okay, and before I leave the qualification and testing topic, why is it, and I'm just going to take you back to the issue of the testing, and I'm not going to take you through it again, Dr. Uzorowski, because you've done that and you've expressed your opinion that you thought Micro Duval and LA abrasion were excellent. But why did you think those two tests in particular were important?
You know, this is what I mentioned, that these two gentlemen, Pierre Langlois, it's you know, a very well recognized name in Quebec and in asphalt. Pierre Langlois and Guy Tremblay, they wrote a technical paper in 1998 on quality of aggregates used in asphalt in Quebec. So they identify that these two characteristics, LA, it was Los Angeles, abrasion, and Micro Duval. These two characteristics control skid resistance of asphalt pavement. So these are two factors, skid resistance. Another factor is polishing resistance. And in that paper, they describe the method, the CPP method, that they use for to characterize polishing resistance of asphalt aggregate. And actually that method is also recognized. I mentioned, I think yesterday, about this technical paper from US Army Corps of Engineers, that they recognize the same methodology. So they, on top of other factors, because I mentioned only this factor, but there are other factors that they consider, but this, from the skid resistance and friction point of view, these are the three critical factors, critical indicators that they consider: so LA abrasion, Micro Duval, and CPP.
Thank you. Now you've been taken through this, and I'm not going to go back through it all. You've been taken through the review and approval of the SMA mix design, and you've given evidence that it appears from the August, I think it's site meeting 10, that it was approved, but we don't have a letter. Let me just ask the question, would it be usual in your experience that there would be a letter, would it be usual in a paving project that the consulting engineer would provide a conformance letter specifically in reference to aggregate?
Not really, because asphalt mixes they incorporate number of components, and basically so it would be 4 or 5. So it is starts with asphalt cement, aggregates. In terms of there are some additives, typically admixtures for. And for SMA it's also fiber and filler. So typically they are not approved separately. It just falls under one mixed design approval.
Thank you. Okay. You said yesterday, and you've said again, I think today, that you would prefer that the aggregate proposed by Dufferin had been on the DSM list. Was that because, had it been, that effectively that makes it pre-qualified, that MTO would have done the heavy lifting?
Yeah. So definitely I would prefer if it was on the DSM list, then there would be. I would prefer, because I would have more comfort. I wouldn't have to verify all these things. So that would provide. I would prefer, because it would provide me more comfort. I had to look at all elements and aspects.
Well, and that's just it. So I take it, Dr. Zarowski, that as it was, since it wasn't the aggregate in Tro's mix design proposed by Dufferin wasn't on the DSM list, that you had to do all the qualification.
Yes, so I basically, I went through, just step by step, as initially I rejected it, and then I checked the aggregate characteristics, this mechanistic characteristics, polishing, and then so this element, and then I wanted to verify field performance to have some level of comfort and some opinion about the quality of this aggregate.
And that's what you did. I mean,
yes.
You just got to.
That's what this is what I did. Yes, this is all step by step I took to evaluate this aggregate, the quality of this aggregate.
Okay, and we've heard your evidence that you still had lingering reservations, and you still made the call to MTO on July 31st. But is it the case that after going through all the 3 sets of laboratory testings and Golder's independent verification of the micro-Duval and LA abrasion and confirmation of the MTQ field performance, did Golder have any basis to reject the aggregate proposed by Dufferin?
No, I don't think I had the base for this, because the base for the aggregate to reject it. Actually, as I mentioned yesterday, this DSM requirement was not in the OPSS 1003. I had no base to reject it, but I talked to MTO to get some more information, and as I mentioned, as I said today, I also heard about this Ontario trap rocks. I wanted to have as much information as possible, what happened and then what to anticipate and what I could do on that particular pavement.
Okay, and then after that testing comes back and you find, and as I understood your evidence is acceptable, did that put your mind at rest about the quality of the aggregate that was supplied?
Yeah, at that point of time, I was comfortable with this. I knew I had, we talked that there were a few numbers slightly below, but I was positive that within, a few days they will go, not a few days, as after it was open to traffic. And so the traffic wears off the asphalt, they will come up. So I at that point of time, I was comfortable. I consider this thing acceptable.
Thank you. And I just want to sort of project forward because and we'll get to it, and I don't propose to go to any documents, but later in your evidence, you're going to get to some subsequent projects where Golder undertook for Hamilton. And in your subsequent work, were you able to verify whether the SMA supplied for the paving project was substantially consistent with Tro's mix design? I mean, do you want me to say it again?
So, the characteristics of the
I'd like to interject. I'm not sure this is the right time to jump ahead to conclusions at a later time. Commissioner.
I'm just trying to put a bow on the point that, in fact, what was specified was delivered, which I think can be done in 3 sentences. But Commissioner, I'll take.
Well, I've already removed a question of a similar nature from Mr. Letterman. I think I should probably adopt a consistent approach here. You can ask that question the next time Mr. Ozorowski appears when we're dealing with later events.
Fair enough. That concludes my questions, and thank you very much. And Dr. Ozorowski, thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, you have the right to close the examination.
I just have one small series of questions, which I think will take about 1 minute or 2. And Dr. Ozorowski, Mr. Letterman took you to a July 23rd, 2007 email from Andros de los Reyes. He referred you to the actual document, which was Golder 1750, but it's in the overview document. So just go to there. It's overview document 3, registrar, image 52. And it's the email at the bottom under subparagraph B of 105, if you could call that up. And so this is Mr. de los Reyes' email to you on the 23rd of July. If you could read this carefully, and then I just have a couple of questions. Let me know when you've read it.
Yes,
Okay. So we'll hear from Mr. de los Reyes. It's his email, but I just want to be clear from your perspective about what mixed design or designs the reservation was for and what the verbal approval had already been given for. And I'd like to take it one at a time. The first thing is, what mixed design was the reservation in respect of? Do you recall?
I think I said yesterday we had concerns with aggregate breakdown in the ignition oven, because that was, for us, that was a very significant step. We had only ignition oven in the Hamilton area, and TRO was doing solvent testing. Typically, if the difference is small, there is not a problem. On a number of projects, we use contractor may use solvent, we may use ignition oven. It's not a big problem. But since we had this issue with aggregate breakdown, that was complicated the issue. So this is my understanding that this is what this reservation was.
But it was only the SMA mix that had the aggregate breakdown in the ignition oven. Is that correct?
I think also SP 12.5 FC2.
Okay.
I think it also incorporated the same aggregate, so that would be the same issue with the other aggregate.
Okay, so all right, but so it says in the first clause though. So I just want to see what the reservation is for. If you are going to issue written approval with reservation for the SMA mix design, so that's the first part. Is the reservation with respect to SMA or SP19 or both?
No. Reservation would be for SMA.
Okay, that's my question. So that's the first part.
SP19.
Then the second question is, what mix design had verbal approval already been given for?
So I understand that it's. I think actually in one of the minutes from the meeting, it was that Golder has. Had a glance at the mix design for SMA and considered this thing appropriate. So, because the mix design itself was good. The mix design met all, I know it's very complex, but, the mix design met the specified requirements. So the mix design itself was good.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Then if we don't have anything else to do today, which I gather we don't, and there's nothing that we have to discuss, then I want to thank Dr. Uzorowski for hearing for the last 2 days, and we'll stand adjourned until Monday at 9:30. With
Thank you.
hope that the participants can enjoy the week.